over to Larkin. Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Every once in a while, as you get older, you get to do fun things. There's bad things that happen when you get older, but the older you get, the farther along some of your former students get too, right? And so it's fun to have former students come back to campus that are doing great things. So it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Jessica Burnett to everybody today. I knew her when she came from Florida for her bachelor's and master's degree, University of Florida, and came here and did her Ph.D. Craig was your advisor, right? Yep. So a co-op unit alum, and the co-op unit was having their annual meeting today, and we were both over there for a little bit. I can tell her I wore a tie for her, but it was maybe for the co-op unit meeting too. But it all worked out. So glad that she could be here today. And I think you're going to hear kind of a unique perspective that she brings us. She's in DC right now in this fellow position with NASA through AAAS, and just a really proud thing for us to have somebody. And I learned a lot from a meeting I had with her today about some ways that we can engage with federal agencies and especially NASA maybe in the future. So thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing your perspective with us.
Thanks, Larkin. How does this sound? Good, bad, okay. All right. Thank you so much for the introduction, Larkin. And as he mentioned, I was really grateful and I'm very proud to have earned my PhD from this department. It was a really amazing place, and there's a lot of people, including in this room, who helped me get to where I am today. And so as Larkin also mentioned, I'm currently sitting out of NASA headquarters in the Earth Science Division. This is not going to be a research seminar because I'm currently doing 0% research. So hopefully some folks in here aren't upset about that. But what I'd really like to do today is to help advance one of my missions while a AAAS fellow at NASA headquarters. And that primarily is to help advance the use of and applications of NASA data in ecological conservation. And are there any CalMet folks in the room? Great, so you're probably not going to learn anything from me today about new advances in remote sensing, but this will be a very high level overview, not only of our capacities, but also of our funding opportunities. Is there a clicker or just this? No big deal if not. Great. Oop. All right, well, that should be spinning, but that's okay. I think we can deal with it. So I have a few objectives here today, and not only today, but for this week that really help me, or I hope will help me meet that goal of better incorporating NASA into conservation research and applications. So the first one is I'm here to inform. I really just want to give a high-level overview of NASA's Earth Science Division out of headquarters and NASA as a whole and where we sit within the agency. I also want to highlight some relevant funding mechanisms. Again, these are going to be mechanisms and program areas that are most relevant to the Applied Ecology program, but really here at SNR, we're cross-cutting, as is NASA Earth Science. I also hope that this talk and the information that you leave here today with will inspire you as individuals and as research and collaborative teams to find new uses of NASA data where you previously weren't using it, and hopefully inspire new collaborations and engagements with remote sensing scientists within and also outside of NASA. And finally, this is an objective for me. I really am here to learn about barriers to participation. So that means what's stopping you or keeping you up at night with respect to spatial data, remote sensing data, or applications. Why do you use it? Where do you use it? How can you use it? And if you're not using it, why not? So this one's definitely on me, although I guess all three bullets are my responsibility. So here's a really amazing org chart that you can't read, so apologies for that. But I just wanted to really briefly go over NASA as a science agency. So in the top circle, you'll see we're about 4 levels down from the administrator, Bill Nelson, and we sit within the Science Mission Directorate. Here, I wanted to point out that while we'll go into a lot of detail about the Science Mission Directorate and specifically Earth Science, I want to highlight that in addition to offices that are run out of our headquarters in Washington, D.C. We have a number of space flight and research centers across the nation that are not only doing science, but they're really kind of NASA's boots on the ground, let's say, in terms of developing out new technologies, producing data sets that I hope a lot of you are already using, and collaborating with external partners. And so NASA's Earth Science Division mission is basically, it's dedicated to advancing our understanding of Earth as a system. It's very broad, so we do a lot of things and we're able to do a lot of things under that scope. So really we focus on producing satellite, airborne, and ground-based remote sensing data to understand Earth system processes and changes. And our organization is more or less split into these 5 divisions that I've shown up here today. The first is our technology. So this is the Earth System Technology Office. ESTO is the acronym. The second is flight. That could just be Googled by NASA Flight Earth. The third is research and analysis. And this is where a lot of the work being done here might align. And I'll go into a little bit of detail there. The fourth is our data and compute services. And finally, the applications or the Earth Action Division, which is what it's called now, is the program with which I am most intimately familiar and mostly support in my current role. And our Earth orbiting satellite is also accompanied by an airborne fleet, of course. And again, these are kind of boots on the ground or eyes in the sky. What do you want to call it? Either way. And again, together, our engineers, our mission specialists, our NASA scientists, and NASA-funded investigators like folks at CalMet and others, paired with our end user communities, help to not only achieve our current and our planned mission objectives, but they actually also help inform future ones. So again, today I'm going to offload like really high level information, but I'm here this afternoon and tomorrow, so I'm happy to follow up on any specific opportunities or ones that aren't listed here. So I'm going to go over some funding opportunities, some activities and programs, and also I want to highlight a few ways that I would suggest you consider engaging with NASA or leveraging NASA's assets or funding. And again, I'm going to focus really highly on applied ecology. And again, I want to point out that CalMet actually has, both directors have been very successful in successfully competing for funds out of NASA headquarters programs, ranging from research and analysis to applications in ag and water. And also, obviously, they have very deep airborne remote sensing capacities. I think you got an email, Mark. No worries. So I wanted to go over a few of missions and highlight some applications of satellite remote sensing that are already used in ecology. And again, you might want to walk out now because you already know all about this, but so the Landsat series, which is anyone here not familiar with Landsat? Yeah, great. That's what I assumed because they're currently in their 51st year in science orbit and have continuously provided data throughout that period and will likely continue to do that for another 20 to 30 years with launch of the Landsat Next in 10 years. And this is, of course, I think, arguably one of the most widely known satellite series or missions in applied ecology, in fisheries and wildlife management. And an example shown here is using the true color imagery to detect harmful algal blooms on Lake Erie. Another what I think is perhaps for this region especially a really great use of Landsat is the incorporation of various Landsat instruments and sensor data into the Landfire program. I think Dan probably knows a lot about using and contributing to Landfire, but this is a broad toolbox that's used for both rangeland and fire fuel management and really heavily relies, I believe, on the Landsat series data. Another really great example of how remote sensing is generally used to advance ecological research and applications is the use of LiDAR. Here, the spinning globe is demonstrating a global estimates of forest height using the LiDAR instrument on JEDI, which is currently offline, but was on the International Space Station. And something I something I learned as I started trying to better and more deeply understand NASA's missions in the Earth Science Division is that the mission names and acronyms often do not capture the breadth of capacity that missions provide. For example, ISAT-2 also has onboard LiDAR, which again, similarly to JEDI, at different spatial scales and extents, of course, can provide information on forest structure, canopy height, density, et cetera. And so this is just kind of a call for, if you see a name like ISAT, which is its primary mission is to understand global sea ice and sea ice change and glacial events, don't believe it. I mean, they're going to achieve that mission, but there's probably a lot of other applications that can be useful for your research. And since I have the floor and a really loud microphone, I think, I just wanted to note that last week SWOT, which is our surface, water, and ocean topography mission, went into science orbit, meaning it's ready to give us data that is actually usable and hopefully really useful. And I find, oh man, this is a really fun animation. Oh, there we go. And so, just making sure. And I really am hopeful for SWOT. So the primary mission of SWOT was to understand changes and capacity of large bodies of water, freshwater and oceanic, across the globe. However, early images before it entered science orbit demonstrated that although the primary mission is to, and the minimal amount of data we're supposed to get on these freshwater resources is for rivers and water bodies of either 15 acres in size or greater than 100 meters in width. Early images and data coming down from SWOT have already shown us that they're able to detect much smaller bodies of waters, including tributaries to rivers. So I think that's really, really exciting, especially, and please someone here or online correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of great potential to leverage this and other satellite remote sensing for fisheries and fish habitat. And so where the rubber starts to meet the road, I think, for ecology and ecological conservation. Oh, Mark, you are a busy person. Is when we start to couple our satellite and airborne remote sensing data with in situ observations, right? And so here, I'm going to highlight a couple of the programs that are really focused again on ecology and biodiversity research. The biodiversity program sits in our research and analysis side of house, and the ecological conservation sits on the applied science side of house. Okie dokie. So what you're seeing here is, again, another example use and pretty wild one, I think, of Landsat imagery in the Antarctic. So this was a funded project out of Stony Brook. Our PI was Heather Lynch, funded under the Biodiversity Program. And she and her team used this Landsat true color imagery to not only detect, but estimate population sizes of Antarctic penguins, specifically for this project, the Adelie penguin. And how did they do that? Does anyone know what these circles are? Larkin, if you don't, then you're not an ornithologist. Just kidding. So what's inside these circles? Do you know what we're highlighting here in these circles? I didn't either until they told me. So these are actual guano stains from colonies of penguins. And so the first iteration of our project that we funded with Heather Brook was really to sit down and figure out, can we use true color images and other techniques to find existing and find new populations and colonies of Adelie penguins. And so that was really, really exciting. NASA really, really loved this, of course, because now we could say, Houston, we have a penguin. Although I think that's an emperor, so just disregard their choice of species. Is that emperor? Yeah, so disregard NASA's choice of species for this one. But what's really exciting also is that as a follow-on project, we funded on-site collection of guano such that they were able to then go in with instrumentation or spectral imaging of the colors of the guano samples so that they could then look back at these aerial imageries potentially and understand the diet of the Adelie penguins in the region. Another project that I think is pretty exciting, and actually we've hopefully got someone in the room who's contributed to this research, was some beaver work out of Boise State in Idaho. So the PI here was Jody Brandt, and the project here was very applied sciences focused and really more so applications than any new science. Well, lots of new science, but really heavily working with local ranchers and the State Fish and Wildlife Agency to understand impacts of beaver reintroductions on the landscape. And again, she worked really closely with, and this is something that our applied sciences program very much supports, is working closely with your end users. So again, ranchers here and the State Fish and Wildlife Agency. And I'm looking forward to some of the beaver communications that turn out to be really impactful, like this Houston, we have a penguin, but we'll see. Another project that you might have heard of is Birdcast, which I think is like growing in popularity because Cornell probably has a really good communications department and healthy budget to advertise this project. But this was some really cool work that NASA, along with a number of other agencies, universities, and institutions funded. This work was PI'd by Kyle Horton, who's now out of Colorado State University. He's actually one of our early career researchers. I'll talk about that award a little bit later. But he developed this Birdcast, which is daily or nightly rather forecasts of bird migration. So you could go to the Birdcast site right now, check out the static and dynamic maps of probability of migration and migration density over your area. And the way that he built this tool out was by primarily using ground-based weather radar data coupled with climate models that were produced out of NOAA, NASA, and otherwise. So I just showed you, I believe, 3 projects that again were funded out of the biodiversity program on the research side of house, and also out of the eco-conservation program, which is under the applied sciences side of house. But our Earth Science Division is so big. We have, it's so diverse. I don't understand the portfolios of a lot of these, admittedly. However, on the research side of house, maybe some of these programs might resonate with you. We've got atmospheric composition, we've got climate variability and climate change, weather and energy cycle program, Earth surface and interior, and the carbon cycle and ecosystems program. And so biodiversity, our biodiversity program is one of 4 inside this carbon cycle and ecosystems. And I haven't expanded upon these other 4 major focus areas, but I'm happy to help get you some information on those. I don't know why I pointed it there. So the Earth Science, I just went over the research and analysis. The applied side of house, we used to be called Applied Sciences Program. Now we're shifting to what we're calling Earth Action. And I highlighted a couple projects, again, out of eco-conservation, but we've got a number of other programs that actually CalMet has been funded under, including our water resources group and our agriculture group, which are very tightly coupled. We've got a wildfires group, which is, it's growing pretty fast this year and next. And if anyone's interested in chatting about fire in California, we're actually running an airborne mission in like 3 weeks, so please see me. We've also got a disasters program that is actually responsive to real-time disasters, and we do have some assets in orbit that are for certain activities potentially redirected to help on-site understanding. And we also have the capacity building program, which is really focused on building capacity outside of NASA for folks to use remote sensing at various levels. So ranging from level 0, level 1, or more or less raw and underdeveloped data products to things like NLCD or the tools that are in Landfire. We've got a suite of learning tools through the RSET program, which are online MOOCs, some recorded workshops that I suggest you check out, and I'm happy to direct you there after this. So now I want to kind of transition into some of the logistics. So how can I find money is probably at the top of some of your lists. And I also want to talk about how I might go about engaging with NASA in other ways other than the funding opportunities. And again, I just want to reiterate that I'm only providing a few options here. And you already have some folks on your SNR team who have successfully competed for a number of our programs. So please, I'm going to put them on the spot here, but please reach out to them with questions. I'm also happy to take them. So first of all, where do I go find where the money is? One of your options is to reach out to folks at NASA directly, so the program officers or staff. The other way, and perhaps maybe a quicker way, is to go to our NSpires website. I've put the link here and hopefully someone can paste it in the chat and it will be in the transcript. But this is just nspires.nasaprs.com. If you go to the search tool, you'll be able to search for keywords. So things like ice, things like ecology, biodiversity. I'll admit that it's a lot easier to find things in the NSpires when you know which programs exist. So again, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help you find some of those. I'll also note that every year on Valentine's Day, we release through SMD, the Science Mission Directorate at least, releases either full-on open solicitations, or we release draft forms stating that we plan to release a solicitation under a certain program element. So that's a really good way to see what's coming ahead, is on February 14th of every year. And that's called Roses. So when you're going into these sites, there's a few ways that you could think about finding opportunities. One of those is to consider applying to be on a missions science team or a missions applications team, or what I think is going to be more prevalent in the coming years is what we're calling science and applications teams. And these are ways that you actually become embedded in the mission itself. You're going to contribute to the mission success, or develop new or advance existing applications of mission data and mission data products. I don't know why I keep doing that. For our new or early career PIs, please check out every year the Early Career Investigator Program in Earth Science. This was formerly called New Investigator Program, NIP. So if you reach out to your colleagues who might already have these awards or proposed, you might ask them for NIP to get copies of their proposals. But right now we are currently advertising under Early Career Investigator Programs. And I believe, I might be mistaken here, but I believe that these are 3-year awards to folks who are no more than about 5 or 6 years out of Ph.D. Another way to engage, albeit it's a little less common, is to propose a topical workshop, a conference, or a symposia. And the way that you do this is formerly through what we called this TWISC, Topical Workshop, Symposium, Conferences opportunity, but that's changed this year. But just maybe keep in the back of your mind if there's any specific type of workshop or conference that you're doing around remote sensing, around NASA capacity building, please consider this. And the way that you'll compete, well, not compete, the way that you might propose to receive funds through this non-compete opportunity is by reaching out to program managers themselves. So if you have anything in mind, for example, for wildfires, we would direct you to our wildfires program officer. And then finally, the other way that you might search this NSpires page is through disciplinary focus areas. I've shown an example here of our solicitation that we closed and selected this year through the Eco Conservation Program. And I'll just note that in this program, we explicitly solicited for proposals around invasive species, natural capital accounting, and protected areas management. All right, so that was the bigger money. Let's go into fellowships and internships. So I'm still kind of salty that I didn't know that NASA had such a great internship program. We provide internship opportunities for high school students, undergrads, grads, even postdoc internships and recent grads. And I'll just note that, again, I work out of headquarters, and our internship works a little bit differently than you might find at, for example, JPL or Ames. But you should be able to go, if you just Google NASA internship programs and go to this page, it will direct you to specific opportunities. And most of the internships are solicited for every semester, and we have application due dates of at least like 3 or 4 months out. So if you're looking for something for the summer, we'll have some openings in the summer at headquarters for eco-conservation. You might want to start looking now-ish just to see what's out there. I'll also note that there is a doctoral fellowship program that's currently called FINEST. I didn't make this acronym, but it's Future Investigators in Earth Science. And that can also be found on the Inspires page. And finally, we do have postdoctoral fellowships through NASA. However, I'll note that you might be interested in looking at them, but I think that they are heavily skewed towards engineering. So another way to engage is to use NASA assets to learn. So we have what I mentioned earlier, which is the RSEP program, which provides online courses and workshops. And if you go to this hyperlink, appliedsciences.nasa.gov/get-involved, you'll be able to directly access their courses. Another way to engage is, of course, with our data. If you email me tonight asking for a data set or a potential data source for a specific topic, I'll probably punt you over to one of our distributed active archive centers, which is just a fancy word for, like, I don't know, data team maybe. But so what I recommend doing is checking out some of our DACs. They're topically and geographically distinct currently. For example, some of the most relevant DAC and data teams who have topical expertise and can help point you to a specific data resource are probably going to be ORNL, which hosts a lot of ecology, environmental data, and biogeochemistry. Another one will be perhaps the Socioeconomic Data and Application Center. And finally, we've got GESDISC, another acronym which stands for Goddard Earth Sciences Data and Information Services Center. They really focus more so on atmosphere, but also have a decent amount of precip. And finally, perhaps the most relevant might be the Land Processes DAC for our terrestrial ecologists in the room. They have land use, land cover change, surface reflectance, temperature, and various vegetation indices. So this is just a way of saying that I'm happy to field your questions about data, but I strongly recommend you reach out to the DAC folks. They are always happy to go into really in-depth conversations with you about what data sources might be of particular value. And also, if you have data, it's possible that you could get your data archived in the DAC, if it's, of course, from a NASA source primarily. So you could reach out to them as well about that. And finally, I just want to iterate here that like other federal agencies, US federal agencies, our data is open access and freely available. I want to say that when I started my PhD here in like 2015, we still had to buy Landsat images, right? Or it seems like it's not that long ago that satellite remote sensing has been made free, but it is free and open. Another way that you might consider engaging, another way you might want to consider engaging on the data side of house is through what's now called, this is a new program called Unbound. This is understanding needs beyond users of something, I don't know. But anyways, it's a really, really cool new program that's funding targeted workshops that bring together both data experts on a topic, new and potential users, and current users of data sources. For example, we've already run an equity and environmental justice funded workshop under Unbound program. We also ran a species distribution modeling workshop. We're currently in the process of running a coastal focused workshop, and I believe the first one was actually on air quality. So if you're interested in potentially forming up or working with folks at NASA to host one of these workshops, please feel free to reach out to the program officer, Unbound. That's Stinger Guwala. Again, I'm happy to point you in that direction. And while I'm here, I just want to make sure that I'm like dumping as much information as possible. I wanted to point out two federal postdoctoral fellowship programs. So earlier I mentioned the NASA postdoc program. I also wanted to make sure y'all are aware of the Mendenhall Research Fellowship Program that is run out of USGS and solicits annually. And as I mentioned on the outset, as did Larkin, I'm currently doing the AAAS Science and Tech Policy Fellowship. So this is a fellowship for terminal degree holders, PhDs, MDs, DVMs. They drop you into either the congressional, legislative, or executive branches into places like NASA headquarters. So folks who are either postdoc now or post PhD right now or soon graduating, please consider this is an option if you're interested in understanding how science and technology policy is developed and implemented within federal agencies, or if you're interested in a long-term federal agency career. This is a really great way not only to potentially propel your career, but also to better understand how the federal government works or does not. And another policy-focused fellowship that you might be interested in is available to masters and PhDs is the Canals Fellowship that's run out of NOAA. I always thought this program was for folks who wanted to work at NOAA. However, I've recently learned that it goes well beyond NOAA. And so I guess, I don't know if we've met our objectives. You can give me feedback on this after the seminar, but again, I really wanted to impart upon you just a basic high-level overview of NASA's Earth Science Division. I also wanted to highlight some of what I think are the most relevant funding mechanisms for the Applied Ecology group at SNR. And hopefully, by providing some of the examples of what I think are really cool applications and new science developments of using remote sensing, inspire new uses, inspire new engagements and collaborations. Comment, go see comment. And finally, again, I haven't done this quite as much as I want to yet. Hopefully we can do that tomorrow in one-to-one conversations, but I really want to learn about why you are or are not using NASA data. And if you have new exciting applications that you want to chat about, I'm also all ears. Oh, my animation started. So this animation is really cool. This is the animal movement platform. So of course, many of our Earth orbiting satellites support the global GPS network, which has been used to track animal movements across the planet. Yep, and that's all I got for you. And again, very high level overview. I'm happy to go into any amount of detail you want. I'm also happy to help make connections where they're appropriate. If you have any follow-up, feel free to email me. I've also provided a bit.ly link here. This is a very informal amalgamation of like links, information that every time I go visit a place, I think, oh, that might be useful for folks especially in fisheries and wildlife communities. So feel free to go there. There's probably a lot of the links that I mentioned today in that resource. So I'm happy to take any questions, and if you're too shy, I'll stick around for a little bit afterwards. And thank you, Larkin, and to the co-op unit for sponsoring this visit.
So we'll start, I guess, start with questions from the audience here, and then I'll look at Zoom too from time to time. So I'll just come around with the microphone so that you can be heard on Zoom if you have questions, but yeah, all right.
Thanks for the presentation. That so much data, and it's just very nicely displayed. I was interested if you'd be willing to share with us about your learning, because I was interested in that, thinking about the natural resource scientific community. Maybe the first question is kind of a obvious one, but are we underutilizing this data? And then why? Like, what are you seeing are the barriers, if any? If you could give us any of your thoughts on your learning.
Yeah, I have thoughts and opinions on this, and I'll also point out that John Carroll's soon to be the president of NAWFWP, the North American University. Wait. So anyways, this is a way we might follow up on this tomorrow or via email, but I too think that we have severely underutilized remote sensing. I mean, I'm certainly not a remote sensing scientist or technical expert. I too, during my PhD and prior and even beyond, used high-level data products, things like NLCD, like highly derived products. I have yet to download and manipulate a LiDAR point cloud. Would I like to? Yes. I don't have the time right now, but I'd like to figure out, is the lack of awareness or use of remote sensing data due to the fact that it takes a lot of time to both learn and also manipulate some of the lower level data? Is it a question of, do we have accessible education in our fisheries and wildlife or natural resources community curricula? I don't know. That's something we can chat about, and maybe with John. But I don't know if that answers your question, but there's a lot of barriers. And for a lot of management questions, maybe some of the high level data products or derived data works just fine as is. For others, we might be lacking. There's a lot of management questions in fisheries and wildlife that are answered and maybe could be answered by rules of thumb, but I think there's a lot of room for developing process-based answers to some of our end users' needs, and how we get there, I don't know. Again, I'd love to chat about it because.
Thank you so much, Josh. My name is Shaban Mula, and I'm a PhD student here at the SNR. I would like to ask 3 questions. The first question is about the data policy of NASA. Maybe sometimes people they don't know about your data policy, or to share your data. Maybe there is a fee that you have to pay. I remember I'm registered with some program. In order to download the data, you're supposed to pay, and they ask a big money for that. It's not NISA, but other program. Yeah. So I don't know about your policy. That's the first question. The second question is about international student. Are international students allowed to apply for the internship position? We know NISA is a federal agency, maybe focus on US students. About the international student, are they allowed to apply for internship? And the other thing is about, it's working with you. There are a lot of things happening globally. Just in 1 week, more than 10,000 people have passed away in northern part of Africa, and that due to climate change, flooding, earthquake. So if someone wants to study in a phenomenon before that, and to come up with maybe an application in order to inform African country, do you have a room to welcome those type of ideas? Yep.
Yeah, so maybe I'll work backwards because the third is really important. And I'd say there's many ways that you could approach this, right? None of them are easy because it's all about relationships. So there's a few ways you could build relationships to get to funding support for either new science to inform or making applications thereof. So one of them is to reach out to individual scientists within our space flight and research centers. So these are NASA employees, right? These are our scientists. There's other opportunities to, for example, reach out to academic partners who have remote science or remote sensing expertise and could also help make those connections potentially. And the final way is to reach out to relevant program officers and express this need. Our program officers are civil servants, so they have to answer your email. But for those types of questions, at least in the applied sciences programs, our agriculture program, our water program, and in some cases our disasters might be of particular interest to the problems that you're speaking to. So I hope that answers your third question. And if so, I'll proceed to the other two. So on international persons wishing to participate in the internship, there's an international internship program, but I believe you have to be a U.S. citizen for the general NASA internship. For the fellowships, however, you just have to be at a U.S.-based institution. So you can be an international resident and participate in that. And then going back to your question about open science, I'd love to hear about what data you're asking for. I suspect what you're asking for is commercial satellite data, which do have hefty fees. And I'll just mention two things. First, we are dedicated to open science, both within and beyond NASA data products. I've got some top swag. This is our Transform to Open Science mission. Come up here and grab some of that if you wish. We're not charging for data. And the second thing on the open science is on the commercial satellite data acquisition program. So if you're working with a NASA scientist or a federal partner, there are opportunities to work through this CSDA program to acquire certain commercial satellite data. For example, we have a few partners, including Planet, which is one of the bigger commercial satellite data providers. So hopefully that answers all three of your questions. I've got the internship brochure as well.
Thanks for the presentation. It's really interesting, and all those animations, they're very impressive. So you mentioned the NASA SPG mission in your slides. So I wonder if there are any updates about that mission. So it has been there for maybe 4 or 5 years and changed the name. But so what's the current status of that mission, and when that satellite will be available?
Yeah, so SPG is pre-launch. So there should be on their mission webpage, on their JPL webpage, simulated data products that you could play around with. If there's not, I'd reach out to the SPG team because there's likely opportunity to participate in what we're calling the early adopters program. And so what this means is that they're looking for data folks who are interested in using the potential products from missions, including SPG, to further develop the mission, right? Because until we launch, there's room to grow. Yeah. And I'd suggest reaching out to the folks at JPL for SPG.
Thanks, Jessica. Ever since you got this, I've seen like some social media stuff about how, ecologists should be paying attention to NASA more. So your message is received here. Just in terms of like me understanding federal government and how it works, like a lot of the stuff that I was actually kind of surprised that NASA has an agricultural thing, and then there's all this stuff for ecology. And from your perspective or what you've been able to see, do they work? A lot of times we would either work with like Department of Interior agencies or USDA programs. Does NASA work with those, or are these just completely independent parts of NASA to apply their platforms to questions in those areas?
I don't know what you mean by the latter part of that, but I'll try to answer it generally. Yeah, NASA works with anyone and everyone who's interested, within reason. So there's a couple ways that NASA might engage through, for example, like agriculture, water, eco-conservation. One is through those competed solicitations. So that's just like whoever's selected, we're sort of working with. The other one, maybe an example for water, is the Western Water Applications Office, which I believe includes the Missouri River Basin for some reason. I might be wrong here. But this is a group that's regionally located, probably online, but is regionally focused on Western water. And they're working with regional partners, much like our former LCCs might have, specifically on water availability and quality topics. And so that's two ways that we could engage with for example, federal agencies and state agencies and tribal natural resources organizations and beyond. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess by work with what I was thinking every once in a while, and this is probably still like within Department of Interior, but we'll get some notifications of like a program. There used to be one that the co-op unit sometimes was useful. It was like Park Service money that was distributed. It had to have a USGS collaborator. So I applied to something and like Craig had to be a co-PI on it because it had to have a USGS thing, but it was a Park Service program. And so those two agencies are kind of
Yeah.
working together, and I could see where USDA might have some money, but the answer needs to be gotten. They know that you have to use a NASA platform to answer this question. And so they might shuttle some money over to NASA. And I don't know if
Shuttle.
that you get that little pun there, shuttle.
Yeah. So I'll just give one example that came from the Biological Diversity Program many years ago, wherein we partnered with Fish and Wildlife Service, and they threw in a certain amount of funds. NASA threw in a certain amount of funds, and the goal there was to help meet the science needs of Fish and Wildlife Service, the priorities that were explicitly defined in the solicitation. So yes, things like that do happen. And that's at the individual program element level typically. And that's just one example of what I assume are many.
So we've got one from Zoom here. Thank you for your presentation. Rana from Agronomy Department, I would like to ask, is there any specific crops that NASA focuses on the field of agriculture and water resources research? Does NASA also have interest or open for collaborative research in Southeast Asia too?
Yeah, so maybe I'll tackle the second part first and just iterate here that NASA collects data around the globe, right? We alongside NOAA especially provide an unprecedented view of our planet. And so, yes, we do fun work that's conducted in, I don't know why I look back at you. We do fun work that's conducted in or meets the needs of international partners. Southeast Asia is certainly not off limits for us because we collect data everywhere. And the first question was about specific crop types that we focus on. I'm going to punt you over, I'm happy to follow up, to the ag program, which I'm not terribly familiar with their portfolio, so I don't want to get anything wrong here, but I strongly suspect there's no specific crop types or species that they're focusing on. I'll punt you to agriculture program, but please follow up if that's not helpful.
Well, nothing more on Zoom, so if there's nothing else from the crowd, I guess, oh, you got another one?
Thank you, Jessica. That was a wonderful presentation, a lot of information. So knowing what you know now and thinking of the youth, those up and coming young scientists, and looking at applied science and how they are now, as you put it out, fires involved in disasters, wildfires and all things, what would you recommend a group of youth from 12 and on in terms of careers? Where should they start looking? Because they think and NASA and they think space, bringing them to a different reality about NASA. What would you recommend?
And I'm sorry, you said K through 12 or beyond K-12?
Beyond 12 years old.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and maybe admittedly, I haven't given it that much thought, pre grade 12. So I appreciate the question. I'll just say before I formulate maybe my thought exactly, I'll say that we do have a number of internship programs across the agency that are for high school students. One of the most exciting ones, I think, is the airborne, I can't remember the acronym, but it's an airborne program that takes folks out to California from all over the country, and they actually fly pseudo missions. So they get to be on the airplanes with NASA scientists, manipulate the computers that are running the sensors on board or the payloads on board, And so that's a really exciting way that we engage, in addition to a number of other K-12 activities that I'm not even aware of out of our headquarters office and at the center level. Yeah, I don't know. You know, the problem is that I don't have kids, so I don't know what kids are learning these days. I assume they can manipulate information in programming languages better than a lot of us in this room by like grade 10. Yeah, I'll think on that. So no answer right now, but I'm curious if anyone else in the room has any thoughts. Yeah, sorry, Wilma. Well, you planted a seed, so I appreciate